Alrighty, so back again. It's been quite a while since my last video. I just disappeared for a few months again. Quite a bit changed since last update, so I'll fill you in. The main difference is I was making the game in JavaScript with a library called Pixie.js, and now I'm making the game in C++ with a library called SFML. And the reason for that is because I initially assumed that Pixie.js would be a good choice because I thought I didn't realize it was going to cause performance issues essentially. My art style that I'm using and just like the way the game is designed, there's like a massive amount of image files, and with Pixie.js it's not really designed to have that much stress on the GPU. And with JavaScript, there's a thing called automatic garbage collection, which also is not ideal when you're using that much on the GPU. So yeah, I initially thought it would be fine, but in hindsight, it was a bad choice. On weaker computers, it would lag essentially. On good computers, the Pixie.js version is fine, but it's just not a good choice overall. So I just kind of decided I was going to restart. I chose C++ because it has the best performance, assuming you actually do it right, which I probably am. And there isn't going to be a mobile version of the game. It's only just like Windows, Mac, and Linux. So when you don't have to support a mobile version, it's kind of like not as big of a deal to do C++ because SFML is cross-operating system. So in theory, I can just have one version of the game. And also, one of the downsides with something like Unity is you have to pay a certain percentage of your earnings to the Unity, which I don't really want to do. And finally, I was already kind of decent at C++, so I can kind of get started a lot quicker than learning Unity, which Unity is fine. Like you can learn Unity probably pretty quickly, but for exactly what I'm trying to do, I want like control over every little detail, like really granular control. And for that type of thing, you really probably do want to have like a code. You want to do game design where everything's kind of tied together with code. Whereas with Unity, there is code, but a lot of it's like done with forms and stuff, and it's not really, you don't really have the granular like control that you have when you do everything from scratch from code. And the performance isn't as good with Unity. The file size would be bigger, etc. But yeah, I put a lot of thought into it, so I eventually just decided I'm going with C++. So that was like a giant setback. I'm now rebuilding what I had before in C++. So this main menu is pretty similar to what I had before. It's almost exactly the same, but this is C++. So yeah, that's the first thing. Yeah, I guess I'll briefly mention something about my personal life. Because I was working on the game in JavaScript and C++, or sorry, JavaScript and Pixie.js, using a thing called an HTML5 canvas. I did that for like a couple years, and I also built a level editor with the same technology. So I became quite skilled with JavaScript, Canvas, and Pixie.js. And I was able to get a job as a software developer now with that exact skill set. So they have like a piece of software they're making. It's a Canvas-based software. So all the work I did with Pixie.js allowed me to get a much better job. So now I have a pretty sweet job. I'm still in the probation period, but I anticipate that it'll go well. I foresee this going. I'm going to probably really enjoy this job. My old job, I was a web developer, and I didn't really like it. It wasn't really that great. I used to like it, and I kind of stopped at a certain point, but I won't get into that. So yeah, so now I have a job where I work remotely. I get pretty good pay. I only work 4 days a week instead of 5, so it's only 32 hours a week. And I have extra vacation days than you would normally have when you're on a 4-day week. So it's very, very ideal. And it's doing something I'm actually good at, which is Pixie.js and Canvas. So yeah, it's a very, very ideal job for me. So that's going to help me a lot. It helps me because I'm doing the job professionally and then working on the game in my free time. So having a job you actually enjoy that's like very convenient, like I don't have to travel to and from work, and I only have to work 4 days a week and stuff like that. So that's going to help me a lot. Yeah, so that was one of the upsides of all that work I did with Pixie.js, is that it helped me get this job. But also a lot of the code, it essentially does transfer over to C++. Like the general logic transfers over very well. So a lot of the code isn't like lost. I can like reference it and use it to speed up the process of writing the C++ code. And also all the time I mentioned in my previous videos, I did a lot of refactoring and like cleaning up the code. That ended up helping me a lot because they look at, when you apply for a job, they're going to want to look at code you've written. So I was able to show them a large body of code that's like well organized and well written. So that ended up helping me a lot. But yeah, right now I'm doing pretty well. I had to brush up on C++ and kind of like take some tutorials, get the ball rolling again. Now I'm quite confident with it. I feel like I can make the game pretty easily, like not easily, but I feel like I'm qualified to do it. So yeah, there was like a period of time where I was kind of transitioning out of Pixie.js to C++, and also I had to find a new job, and things got slowed down a bunch, but now we're back in action. I got the ball rolling again. So anyway, from now on, I'm rebuilding the game again from scratch. So all the stuff you saw before is gone now. The art assets I still have, like I'm not gonna reanimate the slime or anything like that, but all the code, pretty much everything is I'm starting again, except for the art. But now, hopefully it'll be a faster process, but we'll see. So anyway, one thing I'm doing is, instead of doing the exact same stuff I did before, like the level, if you look at previous videos, it's like a 2D platformer where you're jumping around. Instead of starting with that, this time around I'm starting with the Overworld, which is a simpler thing. So here's an early version of the Overworld. It's just a stick man that walks around, and some of the directions, like the diagonal directions, I don't have code for, and this is purely just a rough draft. But in the Overworld is where you decide which level you're going to. Because the game takes place in a dungeon, it's like essentially a prison, so there's going to be prisoners walking around, like doing push-ups, fighting, like talking to each other, like walking around, sitting down, standing up. So it's just a bunch of idling prisoners just doing their own thing in a very simple tile-based environment. And then you have like a very simple top-down player that you can control. And the only purpose of the Overworld is to just go to a level. And then when you enter a level, then it goes back to the 2D platformer view and state. And then, so yeah. So anyway, it makes sense to start with the Overworld because the tile-based stuff is simpler. There's only one layer of tiles and there's no parallax. And the camera is simpler because the camera doesn't zoom in and out. So yeah, I'm going to do like the simple tile stuff and the simple camera stuff. And then in the Overworld, and then when I move to the level, like the level state, where now I have to do parallax and zoom in and out and everything, so now I'll have like a base level camera that I can use to improve upon instead of starting at the hard part. And also in the Overworld, the main character isn't going to be a stickman, but all the other characters will be literal stickmen. So I'm going to do a bunch of stick animation. In fact, I'm doing that today. I'm doing a whole bunch, probably about 8 hours of stick animation later today. That's going to be pretty fun. It's good. It's just like an art style choice. In the Overworld, everyone is stickman except for the main character, and then in the actual game, there are no stickmen, but it's just a stylistic choice for the Overworld. So yeah. So right now, I don't have much to show, but I anticipate that in a week or two I should have significant progress on the Overworld. We'll see how much I can make. That's like a running theme of these videos, is I don't ever make as much progress as I want to, but now I think it's a bit different. So yeah, so this is all I can really show right now. Oops, but I'll go ahead and show you some of my code. So yeah, I have like a debug class with cheats in it. So I have the full screen option on. That's the way it would be in the actual game. But when I'm debugging, I usually say off. So I run the game in a window. This is the window size here. So normally when I'm debugging the game, it's not full screen. But yeah, I have like a window class where I can go like this. So like this is the exact ratio I would want for full screen on most monitors. But if you have a widescreen monitor or like an old school monitor, this ratio wouldn't work. So I have like a system now where no matter what monitor size you have, it'll always fit because it'll add black on each side. If the monitor is not wide enough, it'll add black. And if it's too wide, it'll add black on the top. So that's one thing I did. It'll support any window size. Like I'm building a whole game engine from scratch. So I have like a state manager, an entity system, a UI system, game loop, like math, color, my own color class. This is all very basic so far. Keyboard, texture frame, utilities, window. This is just opening a window. This is making the window fit like I was describing a few seconds ago. It's all pretty basic actually. But yeah, the main thing I was working on so far is one of the hardest things. It kind of sucks that I had to start with one of the hardest things, but whatever. It's going quite well. Is the entity system. So in any game, you need an entity system. An entity, usually, most people define an entity as anything that appears on the screen. So I call an entity E. E stands for entity. This is my E class. But for me, an entity is also a container, which is similar to the way Pixie.js works. So any entity can either be a texture and a sprite, so like a sprite, that's something that appears on the screen, or it can be a group of entities, a container of entities. So for example, like this button here, each button is itself an entity, but it's actually a container. And then inside the container, there's like a border. In fact, I'll just show you the code. UI button fade fancy. So here, the actual button itself is an entity, but then it's made up of other entities here. So you have a border outline, the background main, background disable, border shadow, border background main, etc. So in any game, you really need an entity system. You need a way of putting things on the screen and then also putting those things in containers. And the tricky part is in any container, you have to add things from the container, remove things from the container. You have to be able to position the container, move the container. You have to be able to add a pivot on the container. So like if I put a bunch of stuff in a container and then I put a pivot up here, it has to rotate around that pivot. So I have to be able to rotate the containers, scale the container. So if I put a bunch of stuff in a container and then I say the scale x is -1, it has to flip everything. And if the pivot's on the left, it has to flip everything from there. If the pivot's in the center, it has to flip everything, you know? But with Pixie.js, that would be built in. You would not have to code that. With C++, you do have to code that from scratch. So this entity class is a lot of work. You know, you can create an entity just blank with no texture, so that would just be a container. Sometimes you define a width and a height for an entity. Sometimes you really don't need the width and height. This is when you're defining an entity that's actually a sprite. So right now you just pass in a string, but later I'll have an asset manager. You have to be able to draw an entity. See, this is drawing an entity that's made up of other entities, and this is drawing an entity that's a sprite. You have to be able to take an empty container and change it into an entity with a sprite. That's what the set function's for. These are just some getters. You have to be able to update the texture frame of an entity for animation. You have to be able to add things to a container, then this is where it gets really ugly, or not ugly, but gets complicated. You have to be able to calculate the exact position of anything in it. So if it's in like 10 containers, and one container has a pivot, one container has a scale, one container has a rotation, you have to know the true position on the screen of any given entity. So you have to go through the parents, calculate everything, like it's really quite complicated. So this is the getting the true position of an entity on a screen, the position total. P means position. And I guess I'll just quickly show you I have a position class. The position class is left, right, top, and bottom, and then an X and a Y. The X and the Y is based on the pivot. So if the pivot's in the top left, then the left would be the same as the X, and the top would be the same as the Y, but generally the pivot's either in the center or in the bottom center. So I have a position class where anything that's positioned on the screen has a position class associated with it called P. So every entity has a P. But yeah, this is like get the total position. This is to set a position, some different variations of set position. This is once you've set a position somewhere else and it needs to like update the children essentially. This is just to move stuff around. Now this is the pivot stuff. My pivot system, I can only have one pivot per set of entities. So if I have a container entity with a pivot, all the children entities share the same pivot. That's the one of the few ways mine is inferior to Pixie.js. When you want to have pivots within pivots, you need a transformation matrix, and it's really quite complicated. So right now I'm planning on doing single pivot for pretty much everything, and I'm only going to add in the transformation matrix thing if I really need it. So far, there's some very basic things where I would need pivot within a pivot, but I can do without it. For example, the old NPC, the mouth, when it talks, it would stretch up and down. So I would need to have a pivot right here for it to stretch up and down. But then I also want to have a pivot on the head right here for the neck to turn. So because the mouth is within the head, you'd need a pivot within a pivot. So then that doesn't work anymore. Same with like the actual whole character. Usually you put the pivot at the bottom, like the center where their feet are standing. But then in order to have a pivot on the head, you'd have to have a pivot within a pivot. And in fact, my whole camera system was pivot based before. So now in the next version, I have to figure out a way of doing everything without ever having pivots within pivots. But it's actually not that big a deal. You really don't need pivots within pivots. But yeah, that's one way it's inferior to. So far, I haven't really. I have no plans of doing that really. It's gonna mean it's a little bit annoying sometimes, but for the most part, it shouldn't make a difference. I should always find a workaround. Yeah, it's like updating rotation and stuff, updating the scale, some of the math you have to do when you update the scale. I could probably simplify this, but it doesn't really matter. So yeah, the entity system is the main hurdle I've jumped over so far. There's only 2 bugs. Oops. Where's entity H? I have one bug. I guess, actually I should probably mention here. You can't do pivots within pivots. I have one bug where when you set a pivot, you have to always set a pivot before you set a scale on any one entity. That's really not a big deal because you would do that anyway. Then the other bug I have another bug where the pivot is always assumed to be on the fully on one side, fully on the other side, or in the dead center. And I would need some extra code to have pivots that are somewhere else if I want that to work with scale also. So if I need something where the pivot isn't in one of those locations and the scale changes, I'll just need to write some extra code, but that shouldn't be that big a deal. But yeah, these are the only 3 limitations I have, so it's actually pretty not that big a deal. And some of these I can fix if I really want to. I can fix them all if I really wanted to. So yeah, this is the main code I've written. There's still quite a lot though, like, you know, I could show you a little bit more, like maybe the UI for the main menu. Like you'll have like a state, main menu state, then you'll create a UI for that state, which is the UI main menu. And then in the UI main menu, you say which buttons you want. Each button is an entity. And then you say, you know, you initialize the button, and you add them to the button container, put them in the right position. And then when you navigate with the buttons, I just do some basic keyboard stuff. I could do a better system for this, but oh wait, my comments are messed up. But it would be overkill. I was gonna mention something. I forgot what I was gonna say. But what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I guess I could show you some basic. If I could figure this out easily, I'll show you some basic polymorphism. So like I have this class called a fancy button, which is the one you saw. And the fancy button is a child of the fade button. And the fade button is a child of just the button. And then the button is a child of just the UI. But because a fancy button is a child of a fade button, if you set up the inheritance properly, you can very easily switch between the two, which is basically called polymorphism, which is like a fancy way of, it sounds more complicated than it actually is, but for example, I could go like that, and then I just have to make the constructor the right, I just have to modify the constructor a bit. Let's see here. But yeah, if I wanted to switch from fancy buttons to fade buttons, it would be really easy. I would just need to set a string, which I did, a character size, so I'll say 24, a width and a height, so I'll say 500, what's the width and the height of a fancy button? Kind of want to use that one. 500 by 130. And then a hotkey, and the rest is optional. So I think this should work now. If it doesn't, just, well, we'll see. Okay, when I switch states, it lags. Okay, it kind of worked. Yeah, it kind of worked. Oh yeah, see, this button isn't a fancy button because that button's defined down here, because that button only shows up on the if you're in a demo. But all the buttons I said were fade buttons were in fact changed to fade buttons. See? So now they're not fancy anymore. They're just normal buttons that fade. But and the hotkey isn't in the right spot anymore, but it's because I have to specifically say where the hotkey is. But yeah. So yeah, the polymorphism on the buttons is working. And then I think if I didn't even want the button to fade, if I just wanted it to like instantly change color, I would just have to go like that. And I do believe that'll now, instead of fading, it'll just instantly change color. See, now the text goes from black to white instantly. This button's disabled, that's why you don't see that one. But yeah, so I have like properly set up polymorphism and inheritance and stuff, which is nice. Which isn't really that big a deal, but it's, you know, it's like, that's the expectation is that's what you'd have, but yeah, I'll just fix some comment. Oh god, I don't want to commit. What did I change here? I added a comment there. Added some more, fix some comments. Yeah, I can submit that. But yeah, anyway, having a job I'm actually excited to work on, which is like very ideal for, you know, when you have like this hardcore schedule where you're doing a game in your free time and a job professionally. It's an ideal job to then do something in your free time because I have a lot of time off essentially. I have extra vacation days and it's only a 4-day week and I work from home. So it's really quite nice. Some of this is getting messed up here. But yeah, anyway, I guess that's about it for now. I also learned some more songs on the guitar and got better at the songs I knew. You know what, I'll go ahead and I'll just play one real quick. Yeah, in a previous video, I was saying that I was planning on doing the song, the soundtrack for the game on my guitar. I'm still planning on doing that. So I've been slowly like learning more songs and getting better at the ones I know. Maybe I will just show you that, just for fun. I felt kind of silly last time though, because I just learned a song, and I like generally when you just learn a song, you don't want to like play it for people because you're better off like practicing it first. Yeah. I'll go ahead and play a song just for fun. I'm not particularly good at guitar or anything, but just for fun. I'm just gonna tilt the camera to see the guitar. This is a delicate process. This is a delicate process. This camera does not. Whoa. Okay. This is gonna be bad. This is gonna take a second. Hold the phone here. Hold your horses. Does that work? Okay, that's pretty good. Is that good enough? It's almost good enough. I'll tilt it down a little bit more. It's zoomed in too much. That's one of the problems. But yeah, maybe I'll just once in a while I'll give you an update on how the guitar is going, because I'm planning on learning about maybe 10 songs in total for this game, and then I modify them slightly. Oh god, you could see a big pile of laundry there. These are songs I didn't write myself. I just learned them online and then modified them slightly. Okay. Yeah, I think I'll just play you a new song I learned called Captain O'Kane. Oh wait, you can't see my hands though. I wonder if I can like change the zoom right now. You can see my laundry though. That's not good. Is this still recording? Okay. Well, yeah, I'll go ahead and play some songs just for fun. Maybe I'll put the game back up. Nothing really to see there. Okay, I guess that's good enough. Can you actually see me right now? I guess you can. Okay. Hopefully I don't screw this up too bad here. I probably should have tuned the guitar first, but whatever. that first one is a new one I learned, and then the other two I played before, but that should be a better version of them. I'm gonna probably learn about 7 more. I guess the camera's off now. I'll just hold the camera. I'm gonna close the video in a sec. Screw that. Okay. Well, I'm done. You don't have to. I'm gonna end the video here, but so yeah, I'm gonna continue with the C++ version. Hopefully, make some decent progress, and hopefully get back into the regular updates. There are potential setbacks, like for example, I would have had the Overworld a lot more progress, but last 2 days I was fixing like bugs with the entity system. But I expect right now I can just go ahead and start animating. I'm gonna start animating these stickmen here. Let's see, like, it's kind of hard to see, but I'm animating a stick. These are the rough drafts of a stickman I'm animating right now. So anyway, I'm not quitting the project or anything. I'm very still fully motivated to work on it. It's just yeah, it's a major setback when I had to switch from Pixie to C++. But anyway, at least now we have better performance. Yeah, and the Pixie would have been fine, just not ideal. So because I really care about this game, I really want to use the ideal thing. So anyway, I think we're going to do just fine with C++, and everything's going to be fine from now on. So tune in. Hopefully a week or two I'll be back. But you know, if work is really picking up, because I've only been there for 2 weeks, it's now going to start picking up. Maybe I'll have like overtime or something I'll have to do, but I expect I'll probably get quite a bit done on my game in the next week or two. So anyway, see you next time.